Hi, and welcome to Chapter 6, Section 7. This is our last section in Chapter 6, and we're going to cover simple interest. Simple interest is something most people don't use. They use what's called compound interest when you're borrowing money, but simple interest is the easier way to understand it, and it's the place you have to start. We don't have to cover compound interest for quite a while yet, so we're just going to zip through this. In order to understand simple interest, you've got to understand the four basic parts of it. The principal, the interest, the rate, and the time. Now, the principal is the amount of money that you borrow. And the interest is the amount of money that you pay back when you pay back the principal. For example, if you were to borrow $5,000 at 6% interest, just for 1 month. But if you were to borrow it at 6% interest, you would find 6% of $5,000. You'd get that amount because it's a percentage, and that would be $30. And so when you pay it back, you have to pay back the principal, which is $5,000, plus the interest, which is $30. The principal plus the interest rate. The rate, that word rate, is the percentage rate. So rate is just how much, what your percentage is. And then the time is the amount of time you have to pay it back. And the time is usually in years, though I'm going to warn you, in your homework, one of the questions says it's 6 months. Don't multiply it by 6. Make sure you understand that 6 months is half a year. So, there, I just gave you a clue. Now, when you're figuring simple interest, your interest is going to equal the principal times the rate times the time. And of course we have to change the rate to a decimal because you can never multiply percentages. Always have to change them to decimals. So here's what a sample problem looks like. So our principal is $10,000. We're going to borrow $10,000. We're going to borrow it at a rate of 5%, and we're going to borrow it for 6 years. And the question is, how much money will we owe when we're all done? Now, it depends on how they ask the question. If they ask you how much total do you owe, or do they ask you what is the interest that you will owe? Because if they just ask for interest, that's a straight across interest question. If they ask for the total, then you have to add them both together, the principal plus the interest. So if they're asking for the interest, your interest is going to be this times this times this. And this is my favorite way because you don't have any division. So we're going to say the principal, which is $10,000, times the rate, which is a decimal, dink dink, 0.05 times the time, which is 6 years. And now this is a straight multiplication question. So I'm going to multiply 10,000 times, well, 0.05 times 6 is 0.30. That's 0.3, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. 3 times 1 is 3, and there's 1 decimal point. So I'm talking $3,000 in interest. So if the question asks, how much interest do I owe, that answer is going to be $3,000. But the question, how much will we owe total at the very end, I have to take this interest and add it to the principal, and we're going to owe, $13,000 at the very end, because it's $10,000 with the principal plus the extra interest. So if you're finding interest, it's principal times rate times time. Very straightforward. So I'm going to give you a couple to work on. I'll give you one more example, and then you can try one. So we've got one that is $8,000 at 7% for 12 years. So we're going to multiply 8,000 times 0.07, 0.07. Now 8 times 7 is 56 with 3 zeros and 2 decimal points. So that's 560 for 12 years. 560, and I'm going to ignore this now, times 12 is 6,760. So, if you borrow $8,000 for 12 years, you're going to owe an additional $6,760. This is what the interest is. This plus this is what you're going to have to pay back. It's a good thing to know your interest rates and your timelines so that you can make some good decisions. So now I've got one for you. $50,000 at 4% for 15 years. Why don't you go ahead and multiply these up, push pause, and come back when you're done so you can see how you did. Okay? So 50,000 times 0.04. 4 times 5 is 20 with 4 zeros and 2 decimal points. So that's $2,000 for 15 years. It's $2,000 every year for 15 years. So I'm going to multiply this by 15. And that's 1, 2, 3 zeros, and 2 times 15 is 30. So that's $30,000 just in interest. So this is my interest. So all in total, I'm going to have to pay them $80,000 back. So then the question becomes, what if it's not the interest that you're looking for? What if you know how much interest? What if you know that I want to borrow this and I know that I can pay back this much? What interest rate am I looking for? Or how long can I borrow that money for? What if one of the other variables is missing? So here we're going to go back to our original equation. I equals principal times rate times time. Well, what if we've got interest and principal and time and we need rate? Here's where we have to get good at manipulating equations. And we've talked about this a bunch of times, but here's another place where we need to get good at it. So we're going to put all of these numbers in these slots. So I equals P times R times T. Now, I have a variable inside my equation, and that variable has a 5 and a 1,000 multiplied to it. In order to get rid of this, I have to divide them away. So I'm going to multiply 5 by 1,000, and I'm going to make this 5,000, so I only have one number. So I've got 300 equals 5,000 times R. I'm going to divide each side by 5,000, so that goes away. And now I've got a division problem on my hand. I've got to figure out how many times 5,000 goes into 300. Well, if I add a decimal, 5,000 doesn't go into 3,000. 5,000 goes into 30,000 6 times. 0, 0, 0, 30. So my rate is 6% because I can move my decimal over 2 times. That's my decimal. Get it? So what if we're looking for principal? Let's try it here. Here I've got I equals P times R times T. And again, so I have a variable multiplied to something, I'm going to divide them away. But I've got 2, so I'm going to multiply these together so it's only one number. So I really have P times 5 times 6 is 30 with 2 decimals. So I really have 120 equals P times 0.3. So I'm going to divide both of these by 0.3. And now I want to see how many times 0.3 goes into 120. I can't do that. I can't do that. So there. 3 goes into 12 4 times. 3 goes into 0. 3 goes into 0. So my principal, the amount I originally borrowed, was $400. Got it? With these equations, everything is multiplied together. So anytime you've got a variable inside your equation, they've got to be divided apart. So you're going to take all the rest of your numbers and you're going to divide by that so that you can get your variable solved. Now, I am requiring that showing your work includes writing this down. Don't just look at all of this and decide what you're going to divide, because if you get them wrong, if you say it's 0.3 divided by 120 instead of 120 divided by 0.3, you're going to get the whole problem wrong and you're not going to know why. Besides, we're prepping you for algebra, and algebra needs you to work through equations. So we're going to get good at working through equations. So I need you to write down your equation and then solve your equation. Okay? So I've got a couple for you to try. For you, I've got to find the interest, where your principal is $12,000, your rate is 3%, and your time is 9 years. And I've got one where you need to find the principal, where your interest is $400, your rate is 5%, and your time is 4 years. So go ahead and push pause and try these two problems and come right back. Thanks. All right, I'm going to try and do these quickly. 12 times 0.03. So my interest here is 3,240. Here I've got 400 equals P times 0.05 times 4. This is 0.2, because that's 20 with 2 decimal points. So I'm going to divide each side by 0.2, and my principal was $2,000. How'd you do? I hope this is coming pretty naturally to you. I'm hoping that the hardest part of this is the equation skills, and I'm hoping that with a little practice you're going to get better at those too. All right, what's a word problem look like? Olivia deposits $7,000 in an account that earns 7% simple interest. About how long will it take for her account balance to reach $8,000? Now, we've got to identify our parts. We have an I, a P, an R, and a T, and one of these is missing. She deposits $7,000. This is principal. So we've got $7,000 there. In an account that earns 7%, this is our rate. So our rate is 0.07. About how long, this means this is our variable. Now the question is, does that mean 8,000 is our interest? No, it doesn't. It means 8,000 is the total. The total is principal plus interest. And I need you to understand the difference. We want to know when her balance, everything in her account, is going to equal 8,000. That means 7,000 plus what equals 8,000. So the interest is only $1,000. Please make sure you see that. If it's not spelled out like this, you've got to watch your word problems for tricks like that. So now I've got my equation. 1,000 equals 7,000 times 0.07 times t. So I'm going to multiply these two together. 7 times 7 is 49. So 1,000 equals, 7 times 7 is 49 with 3 zeros and 2 decimal points times t. So I have 490 multiplied to my t. I'm going to divide each side by 490. And I'm going to see how many times 1,000 goes in the house, 490 goes out here, 490 goes into 1,000 2 times, and that's 40. So we've got 2.04 years. And if we rounded that to 2 years, that would be fine. But that's how long it's going to take for her to have $8,000 in that account. Okay? So I've got a few straightforward ones for you for practice. I've got find the rate, find the time, find the time. So give these a shot. Let me know how you did tomorrow. We'll check your answers, and I will see you then. Good luck.